Okay, this episode was good, and it makes a lot of scenes that didn't make sense at the beginning of the season really come together. And Neil Druckmann actually worked on this episode himself, rather than Craig Mazin messing everything in the characters in the story that we love up. And although there are many changes and not every line is word for word from the game, which someone like me really wanted to quote while watching, it wasn't needed to get the point across. This episode was nice, and it gave Eugene more of a role to play and really showed the cruelness of Joel like we see in the video game. And this episode did many things and filled many plot holes that we wanted from the game, but also changed the lineup of what time these plot holes take place and made some scenes feel forced. Example being Ellie saying her life would have mattered and the truth coming out, then the exposition of her saying she can try to forgive Joel, even though in a game this is more of a 2-year build up in Ellie's conscience. Other thing I wanted to mention about the porch scene is how the show collaborated the talk Ellie and Joel had on the porch, with Ellie finding out the truth when she was 17 at the Firefly Hospital. And although it wasn't a major change, it was a good or decent change I can live with. Because in a game, you're trying to increase the length, but keep the player entertained, and hoping that questions you have will be answered the longer you play the game. But show-wise, it makes sense to combine these two scenes. And it makes it better because Ellie even went over questions she wanted to ask Joel since her birthday until now. And I feel these episodes are written weird and confusing because if you play the game, you're already expecting the scenes on the television. And as a director, you have this kind of idea that you have to please everybody rather than just pleasing the people who played the game. Because if you're a game player and you see these scenes just ripped straight from the game, it can make some people happy. If you're a fan like me, when you see these scenes in live action, even though the game is already realistic enough. Or some people mad because they wanted a change in a certain scene, or they just outright didn't like how the game brought a plot point to light. But I think these episodes were written weird or different to surprise both game players, but also to keep TV watchers entertained. And the weekly build-up kind of paid off in a way with questions we may have had since the season's release. I enjoyed this episode actually. Even though it's not perfect, no one's perfect. And I doubt Neil Druckmann wanted to do the same scenes and same lines he did in the game. So it makes sense that he told the actors not to play the games and kind of just wing it to make it feel more authentic or not make them sound like a robot. Even though some lines come out a little robot-y, I still think it's nice and a great idea to kind of do this because no one's the same thing. No one wants to see the same thing you've paid for to be in another thing you've paid for. Like, you want more lore, not more copy and paste. And this show episode really delivered on that. Same with the other episodes. But this episode did its changes and workarounds better rather than just having straight backstory. And of course, with the game, you can't have every backstory or thought in it, or else the game would be too long and outright just boring. It's a formula you have to follow off of, and hence why it's a good reason a show exists for them to add these extra backstories and plot holes 5 years after the game's release, to let our questions be answered rather than every thought being in a super long and boring game. I do love how Joel is more open with Ellie and how we actually hear him say the words, "I love you" to Ellie. This had me geeking while watching.
That's what I'm talking about.
Two changes I don't mind was Ellie's birthday of her not jumping in the water from on top of the dinosaur, because who wants to jump in gross cold mud water on set is not needed. And Ellie finding the other abandoned part of the museum, and funnily running into a boar she calls an animal because she doesn't know what it is. And her finding graffiti of other fireflies being liars, but instead she stared at a bush and trees and actually see actual fireflies, referencing and building up the questions that's eluding her mind. I don't mind the changes of Ellie being given the guitar on her birthday rather than Joel owning it and giving it to her when they get back to Jackson. But it missed out on an emotional scene that could have been more emotional of Joel singing Future Days rather than Ellie asking Joel to play something. Joel plays a song giving the aroma of the fact that Ellie means a lot to him. And that's kind of one thing the show fixed, was them expressing their emotions and feelings more. The game didn't do this because although you have the thought of these emotions, expressing them right then and there is very hard and hard to get out. And usually you don't really think of these thoughts of like, oh man, I wish I said this, or I wish I said that after playing a game, or while playing a game until like after like days or weeks after you beat it, or that scene happens and the game just made it more realistic because they just don't say everything that you wish they said in that moment. But it's something you as a person kind of think in that moment. It's just something you think of later. Just like when you have an argument with someone, you just wish you said something right then and there different rather than what you thought of later. And that's what makes the game more realistic and human-like to me. Not everything was said that you wish they said, because in a sense, like, the game is right then and there. So usually in a game, Joel doesn't really say much to express his feelings from Ellie, and we wish he said it, but it's more of like game Joel is more of like different rather than show Joel where he's just very, very open. And with the show, you can find a kind of fix these things because you know everything is kind of scripted. I also like, instead of Ellie already living in a garage, Ellie lives in Joel's house, making them like a family. Then she moves to the garage for her own space. Like in the show, it's more of like Ellie's being treated as like a replacement for Sarah, for Joel, rather than the game than Joel seeing Ellie as kind of like Sarah, but rather than the show where Ellie's there for Joel's own sanity and good, the game is more of Joel wanting to give Ellie a chance of life, the chance Sarah didn't have, which is kind of why in the show he's like, you're doing all the teenage stuff already. It's more of like a replacement for Sarah. Like, she died at 12 and Ellie's a replacement, so her soul or whatever can live on and he can finish being a parent, which is kind of why it makes sense that Ellie was smiling when she said, I'm gonna be a dad, because Joel actually kind of admitted on the porch in the show that he saw Ellie's more like a daughter, or she hopes she can be a better dad than he was. Like in the game, Joel is like a father figure to Ellie, or they just kind of look out for each other. But in the show, Joel and Ellie is more like a father or daughter type of family, which is what we all kind of wanted. But hence to my other point, or previous paragraph to myself writing this, it wasn't thought of at the time, and more of something you'll think of to add or say or change later, you know? I do like how they added lore to Kat, because she's only spoken of in the game, and maybe the game didn't think she was that important to go over, because you don't want to add so much lore into it and it's just the second game. Also, you don't want to like spoil it like a franchise. You can make a game for everything that happens in Raccoon City or whatever. The Last of Us, it's only 2 games, and it makes sense why we don't have a spinoff of Fireflies, a spinoff of Fedra, a spinoff of Joel and Tommy, because then you're just milking the franchise and it makes the games less special. Because of course there's gonna be some bad games and some games good, and I'm happy there's only 2 games and Neil Druckmann stuck to this. But that's why it's good that there's a show to shine light on these plots and things we want to see later after playing the game. Because like I said, if it's all this lore shoved into one game, it will be long and just boring. To end this video and stop it from being like super long, this episode I give a 7 out of 10, because it made a lot of these loose points and questions come together. Example being, why didn't Ellie talk to Joel on that balcony in the first episode? But as we see, it tricks us with this episode, and the scene was actually just cut short. And I'm very happy. And also, Neil Druckmann worked on this episode himself, and this franchise is basically his baby, and he changed to what he saw fit or what he thought he could improve upon. And I get why he changed stuff, because it's kind of hard being a game creator. Some criticisms from fans, your fans are outright mean, and some are valid, and you can take into account when you make art, you can't please everyone. And rather than stressing over making a game for everybody. I feel he made something for himself, hence why he sought to kill off Joel. The game gets a ton of people mad, but taught a lesson to people who actually played it and appreciated the lesson it taught. Or maybe they just liked the game, who knows. But what I can say is, this episode was what we needed and a true homage to many fans. Also, Seth has a family?